He is first-year Central Michigan offensive coordinator Jim Chapin, and I am John Brice of FootballScoop.com. This is the Our Coaching Network podcast. Been a strong start to 2025. I'm still stalling at a start because we're not to the halfway point yet. And Coach, you absolutely continue that strong start. Whirlwind first few months of the year for you. Thanks for taking time out to join us here.
John, I'm really excited about it, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak with you. I think extremely highly of you and all of your work, so I'm just grateful to be part of it.
You're too kind, but you'll get invitations back after words like that.
Good, good.
You and I have gotten to know each other much better the last 8 weeks or so. I was able to come up to Central Michigan and spend an entire day with you guys, sit in on your staff meetings, sit in on practice, go through team meetings, special teams meetings, your quarterback unit meetings. It was really an enlightening experience and exposed me to a bunch of great teachers that you guys have there on staff. But just a quick big picture question. You're about a little over, I guess, 4 months, almost 5 months in the job there at CMU. How would you assess those first 5 months? Where do you feel like maybe you've grown the most and the team has grown the most?
I think anytime you take over a new job, and especially when it's a brand new staff, it is starting from stage number one. And it was humbling to kind of remember some of those little details that maybe at the previous job that you don't have to cover in the first install meeting. And so it was really great for me to be able to refocus and kind of determine what we were doing right, what we were doing wrong, and start all the way over. So I'm excited about the progress we made over the course of spring. Coach Drinkle and I are swimming the same direction with what we want out of our offense and our team. And so we wanted to create a foundation of how we're going to play, how we're going to do things, how we're going to coach the kids, how they were going to interact with one another. And I think that we were successful in that endeavor. And so the scheme was admittedly minimal, but that was by design. And so we're excited about what we can accomplish this summer and fall camp and beyond. But honestly, we want to coach the right way and have a team built on the right things. And I think that it's been a successful first couple months, but we know we have a long way to go.
No, culture stood out to me when I was there, and I visited with one of your veteran defensive players going into his senior season, and he raved about the culture. And you guys weren't around when he was talking to me, so it doesn't feel like it was a staged interaction or anything like that. We were just chilling in the lounge upstairs, and he was really candid. What do you and just said that there's a culture of realness there, that the care is through and through. How do you feel like you guys have coaches have been able to already kind of impact and enact that type of culture?
I think it starts with Coach Trinkle and what he wants out of college football and the way that he wants to coach, the way that he wants to interact with his coworkers, and the way that he wants his team to play. And that is priority number one. That's priority number two. That's priority number three. So the kids that we bring in recruiting, and we were successful in bringing in some awesome kids at midyear that were talented, but also had that culture fit, but also just how we function on the day to day. And so I think for me, it's very evident that he just assembled a bunch of coaches that are all like him and like-minded in how we want to do things. And then from there, I think it was once you have the freedom to focus on culture, you get more excited to focus on it a little bit more. And in my career, I've had some really good teams and bad teams and good offenses and bad offenses. And I can think back to some teams that underachieved and some offenses that underachieved. And it wasn't a lack of talent. And it was a lot of those factors. And it was culture and it was the cohesiveness. And so I think for me, those lessons have been learned through a lack of success. And so we had to kind of, for us on offense, double down on those things over the years. And it's really paid dividends.
If you wouldn't mind, can you shed some light for us on how you came to be approached by Coach Drinkall? And you were offensive coordinator out at Eastern Washington, but you've got really strong Midwest roots specific to the region there, not too far from Central Michigan. He was obviously at Army, but he had rose to some considerable acclaim for his work at Kansas Wesleyan. So I'm just wondering, I know football, the paths always shrink when you get to drill down below the surface, and they're much shorter between two coaches than a lot of us realize. But if you would, please shed some insight on how you and Coach Drink got together.
Yeah. And so our paths never really directly overlapped. But when I worked at the University of Sioux Falls, he was in the Midwest for many years. And so we knew a bunch of mutual friends, mutual coaches. And so I left the University of Sioux Falls after 5 years in January of 22. And so spent 3 years on the West Coast. And I had been out there before at the University of California, Davis. So I've kind of bounced around a little bit. But he is what I would call a football historian, and he knows every offense in the country and every coach in the country. So just the other day, he came in and told me to watch the 2019 Tulane Army game. I mean, it's just like it just pops into his mind. And so over the years, I think that he had become familiar with what we did at the University of Sioux Falls. And then I think probably for fun, he watched film of Eastern Washington. And myself and Hayden Mace and Brandon Johnson Farrell all spent time out there, guys that are on our offensive staff here. And he really had an affinity for what we did with our quarterback run game. And so when he was looking for someone that could be a coordinator at Central Michigan, he wanted to find someone with Midwestern roots. And I'm from the state of Michigan. Both my parents went to Central Michigan. I went to the Central Michigan basketball camp as a kid. Like this means something to me. I mean, it's crazy. Like for our spring game, I had family at our spring game, and I've been a part of a lot of spring games, and that was the first time that it ever occurred. And so it was a combination of he liked what we did on offense, and then I was a natural fit from a location, Midwest, Central Michigan kind of connectivity.
He is Central Michigan first year offensive coordinator, Jim Chapin, a guy that I very strongly believe is one of the really bright young offensive minds in all of college football. I'm John Brice. This is the Our Coaching Network podcast. You touched on it a little bit there, Coach, about your history and your familiarity with the CMU program, but your journey in coaching is fascinating, far beyond the current ties that you now have being there and having a lot of fond memories from your childhood of going to camps and going to bowl games. You name dropped, I think, going to Brian Kelly games and Butch Jones games, and you knew Zach Azani and that he had brought in Antonio Brown and that history. I mean, that's legit knowledge. But you started coaching at the high school level, I think, while you were maybe still a college student. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I've
Yep.
got to. You've told me this story, but I'm going to beg you to tell it again.
So I was a below average, and that might be too kind, quarterback at Troy High School in Troy, Michigan, which is about 2 hours away from here. And I loved football. I loved everything that our high school football program stood for. We did things right. We were blue collar. We were tough. And my senior year, we were terrible. And that didn't sit well. And I wasn't ready to give up football. And so I volunteered at my high school as a freshman coach, trying to teach quarterbacks how to take three-step drops and how to teach, 13, 14-year-olds how to backpedal. And I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. And I love the coaches that I worked with, and they were so gracious with me, and they treated me with so much respect. And I was so just in love with Troy football growing up. And at that point, I realized that football was a little bit more meaningful to me than maybe everything else I was studying. And so I went to University of Michigan. I didn't play there. And I latched on to Dexter High School right outside of Ann Arbor. I was there for 2 seasons. I worked for Michigan Hall of Fame, Michigan High School Football Coach Association Hall of Famer Tom Barberi. And Tom was, I mean, an awesome person, and he gave me way too much responsibility. I mean, I was 20, 21 years old, and I thought I had it all figured out. I didn't know anything. But Tom, I mean, he used me a ton because I was so obsessed with it. And I was always around. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to be around our players, whether it was weight room sessions, professional development. And so I would go along with him wherever he went. And so he came up to Central Michigan a number of times over the course of spring practices. And so it was Butch Jones era. You're right. Brian Kelly, Butch Jones era. I got a chance to watch teams with Dan Lefevre and Joe Staley and some of those guys, Dan Bazine. Like we had some great teams in that era. And I just stood there. I mean, I met Coach Dramedy, who's a Hall of Fame coach here, and Central, it did mean something to me. And from that point, I mean, I latched on to a prep school in North Carolina, a Division III school in Michigan, a Division II school in Pennsylvania, an FCS program in California, so on and so forth. And so that just kind of started. But like when I was a high school coach, I loved it. And I wanted to coach football. I felt like if I was a high school teacher and a high school coach, I would have been happy coaching, and I would have been doing everyone's children a disservice if I was teaching them history or business. Like that wasn't going to make America any better. I mean, I was just going to be obsessed with football all the time.
I love that story, and it's testament that you are where you are now because you've been so driven and had such a clear vision at such a young age. So, a little bit more on an X's and O's standpoint, and then we're going to dive into some of those moves a little bit. But how would you characterize your offense when you go out this fall and you and Coach Drink are putting together a new era of offensive football for Central Michigan? What do you want the identity to be?
And going back to culture, we want to be violent, we want to be disciplined, and we want to be relentless. And we prioritize winning the last scrimmage, and we did at Eastern Washington. And we feel like if we can do that, we're going to get away from really bad third and longs. And There was a year at the University of Sioux Falls where we had, I don't know, 3 interceptions, 4 interceptions, and all of them came on 3rd and 10 plus. And it was like this aha moment, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do dumb things on 3rd and 10. But what we're going to be is very physical, downhill. We're going to use tight ends. We want to win the line of scrimmage, and we feel like we can develop and recruit big, heavy-handed O linemen, big, heavy-handed tight ends, big running backs, physicality. And if we can win the line of scrimmage, we feel like we can be successful in the MAC. And so that's going to be our goal, is to do those things, protect our quarterback. And of course, we're going to be explosive, but we know that we're going to emphasize the line of scrimmage when at all possible.
Yeah, and again, I was there for a day in a full practice and saw some other stuff and visited with you guys beyond that, and actually saw Aiden, your general manager, 10 days ago at the DFO meetings down in Dallas. So I've gotten to learn a little bit more about your program this spring. I think I remember Coach Drink telling me you're going to have a little bit of a Baltimore Ravens flair to your offense, or that's kind of the goal. And certainly I like that because I saw some dynamism from your quarterbacks that day in practice. And then certainly when you think about the Ravens, you just think about the physicality that they play with. Even the quarterback runs with great physicality there with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a really great comparison. Coach Strinkle is very good. Again, the football historian. At one point, he said it was a combination of Cam Newton, era Auburn, and somebody else. And I was like, man, I don't know if he spent time on thinking about that comparison. But, at Eastern Washington last year, we played with multiple quarterbacks that were really dynamic and athletic. And it was a school that taught me a lot about being really gifted on the perimeter and throwing the football around. But before that, I came from pro style offenses, and we were 21 personnel, lead outside zone, power counter. And so it's going to be a blend of all those things. And I'm really grateful that I've worked for great coaches alongside great coaches. And so it's going to be a lot of lessons learned from a lot of different people. And that includes the people I work with today. We have a tremendous offensive coaching staff. Coach Drinkle obviously has, a ton of experience, and had the nation's best offensive line last year at Army. And so we're going to use all of those different tools that we have in our disposal to try to get some first downs.
Good segue there by you. Perfect time to plug the fact that Coach Drink and Army were not only the Joe Moore Award winners last year for the best offensive line, but he was also FootballScoop's offensive line coach of the year, he and his assistant. So I like you giving me a chance to also plug FootballScoop here on the Our Coaching Network podcast. Again, he is offensive coordinator Jim Chapin of Central Michigan. I'm John Brice of FootballScoop. All right, Coach, you have the last thing on your offense is you've got that Zen garden on your desk. So
Yep, I do.
I know, I love it. I wish we could almost see it on the Zoom here, but if you start smoking people on the field this fall or in the coming years at Central Michigan, we're going to have to incorporate that Zen garden into what we call your offense. I don't know if it's going to be the smash garden, or we'll come up with something good, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, you were around for a day, and now, I've really grown up over the years. I'm a little bit more calm than maybe I was a decade ago. And so I like to think that the Zen garden brings me a little bit of inner peace, and that brings everybody else a little bit of peace too. And I'm not so tightly wound. But yeah, and then it was fun over COVID watching The Last Dance, and Phil Jackson had like the identical Zen garden in his desk. And of course, I immediately went to all the quarterbacks. I was like, hey, you see that? Like, he had a Zen garden, so, it must mean something good.
I love that. I did not realize the Phil Jackson correlation there, and I remember pretty aggressively watching The Last Dance, as you noted. My wife Jess, huge basketball fan, and so we took a lot of, and she grew up in the Midwest, loving Michael Jordan and the Bulls. So anyway, shame on me for not remembering that. All right, you've touched on the fact you've coached in North Carolina, you've coached in California, you've coached in Washington. Coach, that's a hell of a lot of moving. What are some of your craziest moving stories or moving journeys?
You learn lessons. And so when I left the Indiana University of Pennsylvania and took a job at the University of California, Davis, I packed up whatever I could in my Ford Fusion and just started driving. I will never drive cross country like that again. It was kind of one of those journeys. You're in the middle of nowhere in Nevada, and there's no cell phone reception. There's no lights. It felt like I was driving on the surface of the moon. I thought that was it. I was like, I'm not going to make it to Davis. I'm not going to make it. This is it. This is where it all ends. I've had some exciting road trips through Wyoming in the winter, and driving on, you have these giant trucks going 80 miles an hour by you, and there's the roads are so icy, and I'm going about 30, and I don't know how these trucks are going so fast. Again, I'm thinking I'm not going to make it. This is it. I'm going to end up on this road. This is it. But all those journeys, it's helped me grow as a person. And I like to think, like when we recruit, I remember telling this to a kid that because I've been around the block and coaching, it's so fun and fulfilling to know that when you take a new job, your family expands. And so it's like roots of a tree, and you gain all these new roots and these new people that you're going to be incredibly close with, and you're going to have great memories with. And so sometimes with recruits, they're hesitant to leave home. And so that's kind of how I try to frame it, that you don't have to give up your old friends, your old teammates, your old coaches, but you get to expand your family. And that brings me a ton of peace, because I know what it was like being a 22-year-old and taking a job in North Carolina. You're terrified and you don't know anything. All of a sudden you wake up, you're like, how did I get here? And so that's why it gets progressively easier over the years. And I'm really grateful for all the people that I've been around that have made all these journeys so fulfilling.
Yeah, you're better at this than I am, because that you just carried me right into my next question. I was going to ask how much of all those experiences, especially, I mean, you're still a young guy and you literally coached on both coasts of the United States. How much of all those experiences helped you today to relate with the melting pot that is a college football roster? And it's even greater melting pot, in my opinion, in this era of the transfer portal, because it's more fluid than ever before.
Yeah. And in recruiting, it's actually the last 6 months has been this very tangible thing that I went and spoke at a clinic in Metro Detroit, and there was a coach there that when I was 18 years old, I played against. When he was coaching at the time, I threw 2 picks. We lost by 1 million. His team was way better than ours. But that's neither here nor there. But so like I felt so comfortable talking to him about his program, his area where I grew up. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was in California talking to junior college coaches, and I've been recruiting those areas for so long, and I love that. And the older I get, I think I enjoy that part of it more, the relationship with coaches. And I can go into California and remember kids I recruited 7, 8, 9 years ago that now got to coach, saw graduate, saw become all conference. Like that's incredible. And so I like that, especially with young coaches that maybe they haven't recruited before or they haven't recruited a certain area before. And I think there's a healthy respect when you get to a new place. And I'm lucky here that I know everything there is to know about state and high school football in Michigan. But man, it was fun to go to Washington. I didn't know anything about Seattle or in the west side of the state or Spokane. And so it was really fun to learn and appreciate all of the great things that are in these different places. And you can relate. All of a sudden you're in South Bend, and that's very different and very unique to where you grew up. And I think it's really great as a coach where you can kind of pass that knowledge along of being respectful of where people come from. And there's great football everywhere. And man, I love Midwest football and high school football. But it's been fun to go recruit in Arizona and get to know people that way. And I think that makes it easier. It helps me a little bit in recruiting to be able to say, hey, guys, that we've made that leap before, and I've maybe coached guys before you. And that makes them a little bit more comfortable about doing the same thing and trusting me when somebody that maybe they knew trusted me years ago.
Yeah, I call it shrinking the world. And in football, you can shrink it in a hurry, because
Mhm.
it's usually 1 to 2 people before you know you have mutual friends or mutual acquaintances, and you realize, oh, you were at this place when this person was at this place, and you have all these commonalities. So I love that. You mentioned the COVID era and how different that was, and some of those drives across country. I can relate. During COVID era, our goddaughter was being born out in Beaverton, Oregon, and the grandparents were going to go out and help my brother-in-law and his wife, but they had to cancel their flights because of COVID. We don't have kids, so we rented a minivan and drove one way from South Bend to Beaverton, Oregon, which is actually farther than driving South Bend to Seattle, Washington, just the way the states are shaped there. It was about 33 hours, and we drove it
Mhm.
straight through. So,
So it's funny you mentioned 33 hours, because I remember when you plug those distances into your phone, it said like 1 day and 9 hours or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, I just assumed it would give me hours. And it said 1 day. And that kind of put it in a different perspective how long it would take.
yeah, so yeah, we used that time to drive through the Badlands and drove by Mount Rushmore, but no overnight stops on the way. I'm wondering, in any of your journeys, I've driven I-80 through Wyoming, like you're talking about, and I know exactly. I encountered a rare June snowstorm coming into Casper and Laramie, and so I know exactly the fear you're talking about with those trucks. You ever had to pull over and sleep on the side of the road during any of these moves, or what's been your most harrowing moving experience?
Definitely from Pennsylvania to UC Davis. It was driving. That was it. It was just the Nevada. And it was, I think it's because that was the end of the journey. You know, you were so close. And so you were so fatigued. And it was just pitch black, dark, and nothing. It wasn't as if you could call anybody. You didn't have cell phone reception. There was nothing on the radio. It was just you and your own thoughts. That was the one time I got pretty close to pulling over. And then miraculously, and I got it close enough to Reno, and the lights all of a sudden started shining.
Yeah.
And I thought either I had died and gone to heaven, or I had finally reached civilization again. That was incredible. So haven't made a road trip quite like that since, and that's probably by design. I'm a little bit afraid of it now, but that was definitely the most memorable one.
You started referencing the bright lights there, and I thought you were going to have an Area 51 moment or something that you
Not yet, not yet,
extraterrestrial
but yeah.
viewings there. All right, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. You got to recently, the entire Central Michigan staff was welcomed down to South Bend to spend some time, a couple of days, I think, with the University of Notre Dame staff. Do you mind sharing a little insight with us from that? Maybe what you guys picked up or observed from Marcus Freeman and his crew, and maybe anything you specifically really enjoyed talking about with Mike Denbrock, who's just a really fine coach and an excellent human being.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the success that they had last fall and that they've had, it speaks for itself. And we were a little bit more of a fly on the wall. So for me, it was more of watching how they practiced. And it was late in spring ball. They didn't really have an install that day, but you just saw the efficiency and the crispness to what they did. It was like watching an NFL football practice, which was cool. They're extremely talented, of course, but just how polished they were. And sometimes it's helpful to not know what they're doing schematically. And of course, you, as you're watching it, you want to see and you want to learn, but you almost want to take a step back and go, how does it all look? How does it all feel? How are they getting coached? What are the interactions between coach and player, player to player, coach to coach? And you went through it when you came to Central Michigan. You saw that. And I think there's a ton of value in that, to sometimes take a step back and don't be so laser focused on scheme, that you want to take a step back and see the big picture and what people are doing well and what you can take from it. I mean, I took a couple pages of notes, and some of it is just incredibly simple structure ideas and how they practice or how they do a certain drill. I think that can be really, really, really powerful.
That's awesome. All right. Winding it down, this is the last question here with Jim Chapin, offensive coordinator at Central Michigan. I've asked you about Zen Gardens and road trips and your offensive identity and all of that. What's a skill or talent that you have that nobody knows you have?
Whew. Okay. I got to put some thought into that. I mean, I have all these little quirks. You know, I'm a unique guy, and I'm a nerd, and so I have a lot of kind of, I'd think it's not necessarily a talent, but I'm like a Rolodex of random information, whether that's like history, and Coach Trinkle's the same way. He might actually top me in that regard. But like if you need a random tidbit, like the next time you cross over the border and you come into Michigan, you need some history about some random town, or it's just, I got you.
Okay.
But like it could be a musician, it could be a place, it could be a food. Like if you want to talk about Detroit style pizza, like I could give you a dissertation on it. And I think I have some other interests beyond football that I kind of nerd out on some things. So that's just who I am. It's in my DNA. I can't help it. But I think that's probably, I don't know if that's a talent, but maybe if I was on Jeopardy, it might help out. I don't know.
I was getting ready to say what I've now learned is that the next time I play live trivia and I'm afforded a lifeline call, you're my new lifeline call. So
Good,
so
good.
all the pressure too, because like you, I'm competitive, and we'll do some charity trivia events here in town, and my wife always wants to pay for the table, and whoever fills out our table knows that it's free. They don't have to reimburse us as long as we win. But if we don't
Hmm.
win the trivia contest, I expect them to reimburse their portion of the fees.
I
Charity.
got you. I will not let you down.
All
Okay.
right.
I will be prepared, and I will bring my A game, total focus.
Awesome. I appreciate it. You have not let us down any over the course of this podcast. I'm looking forward to you showing out and Central Michigan showing out on the field moving forward in a new era under Coach Matt Drinkall and Jim Chapin, the offensive coordinator, and the rest of that fine staff. Coach, thanks for joining us today on the Our Coaching Network podcast.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.